We back here with another Overbot tutorial, and this one's the big one. This is the complicated one. We're just going to sit down, talk about how to make the best team. Probably the biggest and most complicated bit of OO is the battling system. What do all of these symbols mean? What does all of it mean? How does it work? So that's what we're doing, and I'll be explaining how to make the good team. This is not how you make the good team. But this is certainly not a bad team. As you can see, my streak is not too bad. My top streak is like almost 2,000, something like that. So it's certainly not a bad team. So what do you need to make a good team? Well, the first thing is the obvious thing. You need levels. Levels are not easy to get. You get levels a couple of ways. You can do hunts. As you can see, that gets you some XP. It's not very much XP. You can do battles. As you can see, that gets you some XP. It's not very much XP. And you can do your hunt bot, which, if it'll load, gives you quite a lot of XP. There you go. 24 hours, I'll get 150,000 XP. They're the ways of getting XP. I'm pretty sure that's it. So mostly what you're going to be wanting to do to get a lot of XP is maxing out your hunt bot. Obviously mine is still not maxed out, but it's a pretty high level. So, you know, we could do another level in experience right now. Look, there we go. Now I'll get a bit more XP every 24 hours. Isn't that great? So yeah, getting XP takes a while. If you have a look at the amount of XP that you need once you start getting to these kind of levels, it's like 5 million. So that 150,000, suddenly not so big. Not so big. So yeah, leveling up these animals is going to take a long time. You have to be aware of that. Obviously, if you have the low leveled animals, like down here, they're not too bad. As long as you get your hunt bot up, you'll start leveling them up. But yes, levels obviously make a big difference. You can tell. Just look at like the HP, for example. My boar, 1,158 HP. Oh, okay, to be fair, all of those have 0 HP because they're dead, but like, you get the point, you know? Let's have a look here, max. Max HP, like, 620, 572, 1,158. You know, it's making a big difference, right? That's the point. So, and that's levels. Mostly. Levels matter a lot. I mean, okay, my eagle doesn't have that much HP, but it's still more than these guys. So, you get the point. Try and get some XP. Right, what is next? Next is these little stats. What do they all mean? So we've got HP, that's fairly self-explanatory. Attack, again, fairly self-explanatory. And PR, this is basically defense. I'm not sure exactly how the maths behind this works, but I think this just reduces incoming damage. So, yeah, that's nice. We have WP, which is basically like mana. This is like your magic amount that you need. And mind that you need magic to use every weapon, not just magical weapons. Like if you're using a sword, you still need I think this technically stands for weapon points, but it's kind of like mana, right? So yeah, you need some of this. Mag is actually magic. This is how much damage you would do with a magical weapon. And then this is magic defense. Oh, do you think this is resistance? Physical resistance and magic resistance. That makes sense. Yeah, again, it's basically the equivalent of this one, but for magic. The same as this is the equivalent of this one, but for magic. This one, not so much, I suppose. But you get the point. That's what the stats mean. So how do we get these stats? Well, if we have a look at the OO Dex, which is definitely not a rip-off of the Pokédex. Mind you can only look at these animals if you've got them in your zoo, but that's fine. So for example, the eagle, this is like their base stats for the eagle. It's got a little bit of resistance, not very much mana, which is not great, not very much HP, which is also not great, but what it does have is a lot of attack. So this is an attacking animal. You give this a physical attack, no, not magic attack. Magic attack is only one. You give it a physical attacking weapon, and it will do a lot of damage, right? So for example, if we look at the weapon that I've given it here, the bow, the bow deals 150% of your strength to a random opponent. So you really need to have a high strength, a high attack, right? If you don't have a high attack, this bow isn't going to do anything. You know, if you've got 1, deals 150%, you're doing like 2 damage to somebody. That's useless, right? Okay, of course, you're going to have levels, it's going to do a bit more than that, but you don't want to use it, right? My eagle has a lot of attack, so it can actually use this weapon. Now note, costs 126 weapon points. My weapon point stat is very low, so my weapon points here only 594. You may think, oh, well, this is worrisome, you can only use it a few times. This is why I use mana tap. You've got to make sure your passives fit your weapon. We'll talk about passives later, but as you can see, mana tap replenishes weapon points. So now I'm getting the weapon points back, and that depends on the damage dealt. Of course, I'm dealing a lot of damage because I have a lot of attacking points, so the mana here doesn't get used up so much because it's being replenished. So it's a good combination. If you look at the shield, for example, that's another obvious one. Shield is good on tanks. I will explain the actual individual weapons later, but you know, obviously shield's going to be good on tanks. We look at the Orodex on boar. It's got a lot of health points. It's a good tank, you know. Now you may notice as well that it has some points in other stuff. For example, it's got some weapon points. Now obviously I can't use mana tap on the shield because it's not dealing damage. It's using a shield. Shield doesn't deal damage. Again, I'll explain individual weapons in a minute. This was just an example. So it needs some weapon points in order to actually use the shield, because it can't use mana tap. So for a tank, you're going to want some HP and some weapon points. The attack here is pretty much useless. This is why boar is not actually that great a tank. It is a pretty good tank, because it has a lot of health, but it has a lot of weapon points. But there are much better tanks than boar. To be fair, there are better attackers than eagle as well, and there are certainly better supports than the frog. But I like my little fabled team. My team is not optimal, my team is not great, but it's not bad. Right, so we've gone through stats, we've gone through levels. Now we move on to weapons. Weapons is the complicated bit. Now, I said before that you've got supports and attackers and all the rest of it. That's what you need to have. In a good team, you have one attacker, one support, and one tank. Right, so here's my attacker, and here's my support, and here's my tank. Right, you can find out who's a good support, attacker, and tank by looking at their stats. Like I said, eagle, good attacker. Boar, good tank. In order to look for a good attacker or tank, a good attacker is going to either have a lot of attack or a lot of magic. They could be a physical attacker or a magic attacker. That's fine, you can pick either, but it needs to have most of its stats in one of these. To get a good tank, you need to have mostly in HP, but also some weapon points. One of the best tanks is the... well, the best tank is arguably the sloth. A lot of people say the sloth's the best tank. You can see why. Mostly HP, also loads of weapon points, so you even got a little bit extra in defense. Notice it doesn't have any attack or magic. It's because it's not attacking, it's a tank. Right? This is why this is wasted stats. If these stats were in a different thing, the boar would be better. We can also have a look at something like the snail. This is a very easy pet to get very early on. And yet it's also a very good tank. 3 weapon points and 8 HP. 8 HP, that's a lot of HP. That's more HP than the boar. But it does have less weapon points than the boar. You kind of want a couple of extra weapon points, and you see it's wasted a bunch of stats in magic. Whereas the boar's got them in, it's got an extra defense, it's got an extra weapon point, and it's got extra attack. Attack is slightly better than magic attack, because if you run out of weapon points, your animal will start physically attacking, which uses this. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Whereas magic attack is normally better because the magic weapons normally do more damage. But yeah, we'll get into that later. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But in something like a snail that you're going to be using as a tank, you would rather have attack than magic. So that also makes the boar slightly better. So yeah, boar's better than snail, but snail is only a common animal, and yet is a really good tank here. As you can see, loads of HP, you know? One with a really good ratio is the skull. Now, this is an event-limited animal. You can't get this unless you've already got it, but if you do already have it, it's a really good animal. It's got 10-6. 10-6 is a great ratio. 10-6 is its quality. 10 health and 6 weapon points works well, and it's barely got any stats wasted anywhere else. But you see, this is why the Sloth is probably better anyway, because despite the fact that its ratio is a little worse, it hasn't wasted stats in magic and attack, whereas this one has. If these two stats were over in defense, or over in these two, the Skull would be better. But there you go, you can't have everything. More animals are added frequently with events, and some of them are good. So maybe you'll get them. If you have Patreon for OO, then you have a much wider range of pets that you can get, and a lot of them are perfectly optimal. So Patreon is pretty reasonable. Most of, in fact, all of the people at the top of the leaderboard will be using Patreon pets. So yeah, there's a little aspect of pay to win there, but certainly a lot of these pets are really good for sure, and the levels make more difference. So if you can get the XP, then you don't need the Patreon. Okay, so that's tanks. Now attack, as we said, that's just attack and magic. You don't really want stats in anything else. What about support? Support's a little bit more complicated, but let's have a look at the frog that I use. Right. So what's the frog got? The frog, as I said, is not great. But what you need a lot of magic. Magic's important. And you also need weapon points. Weapon points are also important. Having a little bit of health is advised, because otherwise the shrimp would be really good. To be perfectly honest, I don't know why everyone hates the shrimp so much. I get that it is not as good as the other ones, but it looks pretty good to me. The shrimp, it doesn't have any health. That's the problem. No health at all. But it does have a perfect split between weapon points and magic. All of its stats going to that. It looks good to me, but don't listen to me. Everyone else says shrimp is bad, so whatever. I get that it doesn't have health. I just imagine it would be better than frog, because frog barely has any weapon points. But as you can see, it's got a fair bit of weapon points. It's got a lot of magic. It's got some HP, and then it's got a bit of random resistance, which isn't really helping it, but you know, whatever. So that if a frog is not too bad. Now, if you want a good support, you can use something like the squid, which is a bit lower rarity. Squid's good, as you can see. It's got a lot less magic, but it also has a lot more weapon points, and it's still got the HP as well. So yeah, all in all, squid, pretty good. Squid's a good one to go for. I can't remember what the best support is. I'm not sure, but it's probably a hidden animal, to be fair. Probably a hidden animal. So yeah, the hidden ones are really rare, so I wouldn't worry about them if I were you. But yeah, a lot of them are really good. Of course they are, they're really rare. So yeah, there you go, that's how you make your team. You want to have 3 animals that are tank, support, and attack, and that have those particular stats, right? I can advise using the squid, I can advise using the skull, I can advise using the sloth or the snail, if you haven't got it, you know, or whatever, you know. If you want a little tier list, we can nip over to this over here. Give me a sec. And there we go. Here's a little tier list that someone made. I found it on the... People are always making tier lists, so... And some of them disagree, but this one looks perfectly reasonable, so, you know, whatever. Now, we have attackers, healers, and tanks. And as you can see, we've got lizard, monkey, and snake. They're all hidden. We've got some event ones here, and then we've got some bot ones as well. All animals that you probably won't be getting, and ones that I haven't mentioned. But you see the squid, very high up healer, eagle, very high up attack. I mentioned the skull, which is very high up in tank. So yeah, you can use something like this to make a good team. You know, what might you actually realistically be getting? You could get, well, you could get the squid quite easily, or the unicorn. You could be maybe getting the fish. Fish is really good at magic attack, same as spider's good at regular attack. The deer's not bad. I don't like the deer as much as the fish or the spider, but yeah, apparently it is up there. And as you can see, they're all here. Snail, a bit lower down, but if you look at all of these are all, you know, bot, event, glitch, that's also hard to get. Boar's fable, 2 more event, and then there's snail. So unless you're getting the boar, then snail's pretty much your best tank for a long time. But yeah, anyway, you get the point. Nice tier list. You can use this if you like. So there you go. Like I said, I just use my favorite animals. But now you've got your animals, you need to put weapons on them. How do you put weapons on them? Well, let's start with going on OOW. We have all of our weapons here. You get these weapons by doing OOWC. You can also do OOWC all if you want to open all of them. I don't want to open all of them, so I'm not going to right now. And you can also dismantle weapons if you don't want to use them. And that'll get you some weapon shards. There you go, 5 weapon shards, which you can use for improving weapons. I'll get to that in a second. There you go. Weapon shards. So, what weapons do you want to be looking out for? Well, I mentioned mana tap before. Mana tap is very useful. Mana tap's good on attacking weapons. So, for example, the dagger, that's really good. Dagger with mana tap, really good. Sword's pretty good. It's not great, but it's alright. And mana tap is what you want on that. Shield with mana tap is a meme, ignore that one. The vampire staff, if you got mana tap on that, it's good. Obviously not all of my weapons are perfect, but yeah. Strength is alright on swords and bows. You know, you don't have to use mana tap. Mana tap is advised, but things like strength are fine. If we have a look at the weapons, you can see what the passives do and just see if it makes sense, you know? Strength increases your strength, as it would, and then the sword deals percentage of your strength. So if you're increasing your strength, then your sword is going to be doing more damage. And this is only a rare weapon, so it's not that great. But you can see how strength would help it out, you know? Whereas other things don't help it out. For example, I mentioned the shield with mana tap is a meme, because mana tap increases, replenishes weapon points for damage that you deal. You're not dealing damage. The shield reduces incoming damage and adds taunt. This isn't dealing damage, so mana tap's useless. You get a lot of this with the orbs. Let's see if I've got any orbs. Now, here we go. Orbs are funny. Don't use orbs, they're just awful in almost all situations. But let's look at the orb. Description: this weapon has no active ability but comes with 2 passives. Okay, so what does the passives do? All damage dealt replenishes your weapon points, and then discharge when weapon points is replenished, deal extra damage as magic damage. Now this is actually a reasonable combination, because you're replenishing weapon points and then dealing extra damage when the weapon points is replenished. So that's not bad. But at the same time, this doesn't deal damage, you know? And replenishing the weapon points is useless anyway because it doesn't cost any weapon points. So this isn't actually a good weapon even though these 2 passives work together. Because where's the damage coming from? I mean, like I said, it'll do some physical attacking, but all of the weapon points replenished just die because you're not spending any of them. So, yeah. It's rubbish. Despite the fact that it's a legendary weapon and its 2 passives work together, this weapon is still rubbish. Don't use orbs. But yeah, you really need to make sure the passives work. This is just self-explanatory, you know. Now, for example, this here Spirit Staff is not bad. It's not using mana tap because it doesn't do damage, right? Now it's using weapon point, which increases your weapon points. That's reasonable, because this costs a lot of weapon points. I mean, it actually doesn't, to be fair, but you need to have a lot of weapon points to use it. That's why you want your support to have a lot of weapon points in their stats. So yeah, increasing weapon points makes sense. Now, we have a look at my team. What have I got on my team? So, my eagle is a physical attacker, so I've given them a bow. Right, we looked at the bow. It deals damage based on their attack. They have high attack, it makes sense. They have mana tap, so that they gain back the mana, because they don't have much mana, because they're an attacker. This is the strategy you want to be going for with an attacker. You want to get someone with high attack, very little stats in other places, and then get a mana tap weapon. Mana tap isn't necessarily the only choice you can make. Like I said, you could use something like strength if you're using a sword or a bow, but generally you want to go with mana tap. And then you get a physical attacking weapon. Alternatively, if you want to use something like the fish has all magic attack. So with the fish, you could use, you know, an energy staff. Here, energy staff is a magic attacking weapon, right? Or maybe like a vampire staff, that's great as well. Or even a dagger. That counts as both, but you Daggers do physical and magic attack, but I think you want the magic attack on it rather than the physical. Magic's better. So yeah, if you're using a fish, you could use something like that. I use my eagle and I've got my bow. Now, with the support, you want to use a spirit staff or a healing staff. They're pretty much the only two support things. Like, technically you've got banners and stuff, but they're useless. Use spirit staff or healing staff, and spirit staff is generally considered to be better. Let's have a look at my spirit staff. What's it doing? If it'll load. Apparently not. Hey, there we go. So, defense up reduces incoming damage by almost 30%. Right, so that's good. Right, and then its passive is energize, which replenishes weapon points. Now I mentioned replenishing weapon points is very important, but of course the spirit staff isn't dealing damage, so we can't use mana tap. So we've got energize that just replenishes after every turn anyway. Energize is really good on a spirit staff and a healer staff. But yeah, spirit staff's normally better than healing staff, but you can use healing staff if you want. Healing staff, would you guess it, heals. So I won't go over that, but yeah. So you want to be using that probably with energize. Again, just fiddle about with the passive, see what you think works. Don't put strength on a spirit staff because it's not dealing damage. You know, it's self-explanatory. Energize works well. Okay, and then the boar. Now I mentioned the shield before, but let's go over it in a bit more detail. It adds taunt, reduces incoming damage. That's great, because my boar has a bunch of health. It's also got defense up from the spirit staff, so it's not taking much damage because of that. Now I've also got regen on here. Regen's great on a shield, obviously. Heal 10% of your max HP after every turn. If you don't have a high max HP, this is pointless. My boar has a high max HP, therefore this is good. You see? Now if you're using a tank that has more weapon points than health, you probably don't want to use regen. You might want to use something else. But alternatively, if you've got a high max health, maybe you do want to use regen. It depends on your pets. You can also use energize with the shield. In fact, you can also use thorns on a shield, because that will deal back true damage for each damage that it takes. Obviously, it's going to be taking a fair bit of damage. It's the tank and it's got taunt. So thorns works. You can use whatever passives you like, but again, you know, if you put strength on it, it's not going to help, because it's not dealing damage. Right? If you put mana tap on it, it's not going to help because it's not dealing damage. So just think about these things, right? Regen works, energize works, thorns even works, a couple of things works, but a lot of things don't work. Most things don't work, and most people just shove on whatever passive of whatever high rarity weapon they've got. Ignore the rarity. The rarity doesn't matter. The rarity will increase these individual stats here, right? Now obviously increasing those stats is helpful. But if you're increasing the strength buff on a shield, it doesn't help you, because the strength buff makes no difference to the game. Right? So getting the correct passive and the correct weapon with the correct animal is way more important than the rarity of the weapon. Of course, you want to be getting high rarity weapons at some point. So this moves on to the last thing that we're going to be talking about, which is reforging weapons. Re-rolling weapons, right? So if I go back onto my team quickly, let's have a go at re-rolling some weapons. Now there is two types of re-rolls that we can do, and it lists them here, I believe. Yeah, here we go. Oh, weapon, re-roll, weapon ID. We can go for passive or we can go for stat. Now what you want to be doing is getting a weapon that has really good points here and points here, and then re-rolling the passive, because then you're only re-rolling one stat at a time. You will get a good weapon. But it's effort, because you need to be getting lots of weapons and checking them all to see if they've got the good weapon cost and the good stat here. Right. Personally, I can't be bothered with that. That is the best way to do it, but again, I'm not very optimal. So what I do actually is I re-roll stat. What stat does is it keeps the passive, so you don't have to be paying attention to all of this stuff. You can just pay attention to the quality, which is only one figure. And then it will just re-roll all of these. That means you could have a legendary weapon, you re-roll it, and it goes down to a common weapon. It's suddenly garbage. But the thing about re-rolling is you don't have to accept. So let's have a look at what it does. We'll take my bow here, it's only at 88%. I've been trying to get these all up to legendary for the past, few years. Obviously not happened so far, but when... Oh yeah, I didn't put Yeah, okay. When you're using stat instead of passive, it makes sense that you're not getting it. See, here we go, 88% and it's down to 25%. But I don't like that. Try again. Now 41, still don't like it. Try again. 52, still don't like it. Try again. And I can just sit here for ages. You know, I've got 50,000 weapon shards. I can do whatever the hell I want. And this is what I will do. I'll spend my weapon shards. 87%, now that is really good. Look, it has even higher strength. It's got lower weapon cost. It's just restoring a little bit less of the weapon points. Now I am actually going to take that, not going to lie. Despite the fact that it's one lower percentage, I think that the weapon cost and the strength is more important than the mana tap percentage. Better yet, these are very near optimal. So now it's actually almost viable for me to... 160 I'm pretty sure is max, and I think it's only 120 here. So it's now plausible for me to start re-rolling passive on the mana tap, because that will remove mana tap entirely, but on the other hand it's only changing this one stat, so these two epic stats here will stay. But of course I need to roll a mana tap and I need it to have a really high point. So is there any point in me doing that? Well, let's give it a go. We'll roll passive. See what we get. See, it's staying at a reasonably high percentage because these two stats are staying. But this isn't even mana tap now, this is health point. I need mana tap. So even if this stat was really good, I can't take it. I need to wait for mana tap now. And even... See, there you go, instantly up to legendary. Because these stats are so good, as soon as I get a good passive, it goes up to legendary. But this isn't mana tap, so I can't use it. And it's kind of disheartening, I feel. Right? Because you're putting all of this effort into getting a really good weapon, and then you don't even get the passive that you wanted. You see? So personally, I normally go for re-rolling stat rather than passive. But if you are re-rolling passive, you will get what you want sooner, most likely. Just make sure that these stats are the good stats. You know? Yeah, anyway. That's all I've got. I think that's all that we've gone through in making a team. You should get the point. I'm kind of just hoping that I get a mana tap here now. But it's very unlikely to actually happen. And of course, like I say, you can just not accept them. This cross here is just not accept. It'll give you back the weapon that you had at the start. I'm actually getting quite a lot of legendary weapons because those top two stats are insanely good. It was very lucky to get them, to be perfectly honest. It's one of the upsides of another legendary, like, but one of the upsides of re-rolling stats that, you know, there's no real chance of decreasing your weapon quality. You just slowly work your way up. But trust me, it is slow. There we go, it's now gone red. I no longer have enough weapon shards. So it's just stayed as this top one. It hasn't given us this Thorns one. You know, we've kept the top one. I'll probably reroll passive on it some more because it seems getting legendaries on there is really easy now. Of course it is. These two stats are insanely good. But yeah, the weapon points on this need to be a bit higher, and I need to actually roll mana tap in order to get that. So it's all RNG on the weapon re-rolling, but slowly you can build up your weapons to be a higher rarity, and you get to keep the passives that you want on them as well. If you use stat, if you use passive, you keep these, I guess. I mean, you know, it's up to you what you do with the re-rolling. And then eventually what you end up with is a team with some really good weapons. Again, mine are only mythical because I re-roll with stat, not passive, and so it's not going to be as good. But at the same time, they are certainly good weapons, and they fit my team, and that is why I get the high streak, as well as my levels. But yeah, I think we've gone through everything now, so let's cut it short here, because we're almost hitting the half-an-hour mark, and gotta keep it below that. So, yeah. Bye!